Okay, so occupational interest is simply occupational rental. When you buy property, there's obviously a process, a conveyancing process that has to ensue to make sure that the ownership is moved from the seller to the buyer. Now, during that process, which can take very long, it can take 3 months, it can take a year, depending on different things. And now, when you're buying off plan, it's important to understand that the unit actually has to be fully constructed so that it can be transferred to you. A sectional title scheme is opened. So during that process, even though you've paid for the property either via financing, you've gotten a bond approval, or you've paid cash, there is occupational interest or occupational rental. And occupational rental will be applicable from the time that the occupation certificate is applicable or it's issued, which means that the unit is now fit for you to basically, which means that the unit is now ready for you to take over and move in. Now, when you move in, you must remember that the transfer process is still continuing and you haven't yet taken ownership, even though you have signed an offer to buy the property. During that time, there's what we call occupational rental or occupational interest, which you pay to the owner. You're paying to the owner through the conveyancers, because while you are busy receiving transfer of the property, the developer, if that's the seller, is paying, they're having to service their mortgage loan for the land they built on. So the expenses that are relating to where they are constructing and everything else don't stop, which means that they also need to recover that from you, who is the person that's now enjoying occupation of somebody else's property, which is the developer's property, until it becomes your own. So that is what occupational interest means. And it's payable in advance. So you paid before you move into the property, and you paid monthly until you take transfer of the property. It's not something weird that the developer is doing to get your money, but it's something that makes sense if you don't yet own the property, that you have to pay. And of course, you can use your discretion. If a deal that comes with occupational interest doesn't make sense for you, then that is, it's to your own discretion, and you can decide whether you want to buy that property or you want to look into another property where the terms are maybe a bit more flexible. And I think this is why it's also very important to conduct that due diligence, have that checklist that we prepare for you, to know that you need to prepare for your transfer costs, your bond costs, your occupational interest, and many other related costs. If you're buying in a scheme, you also need to transfer, or you need to rather pay for body corporate levies. So there are many other costs that are involved, and we're going to unpack that more in another segment. But yeah, that is what occupational interest is all about. When buying property, it's important to understand, especially as an international investor, that you can either buy property in your personal name or you can put it in a company. Now, South Africa is very flexible, and it encourages investors to come in and stimulate economic growth by investing either in real estate or any other sector. And when you are buying property, it's important to understand that you can create a company. It's a private company, Pty Limited, and it gets registered with the CIPC, and you also get registered for tax. Now, the advantages of having a company registered is that you tap into the tax bracket that companies pay, instead of you being taxed at a rate that normal individuals are taxed. And obviously, the more you make, the more you're going to be taxed. Now it's your company that gets taxed, and there are some deductions, and it's taxed obviously at 27% in South Africa at the moment. And you also qualify to have some deductions, so you end up making sure that your taxable income is actually very less, and you don't end up paying that 27% because of the structure. So structure is very important to consider properly. And if you are a serial investor, so you're buying a lot of properties, it's even important to consider a more, not a complicated structure, but a structure that's going to help you create a legacy and save on tax as well. So some people will create a company or create multiple companies, some operating companies, some holding companies, and also take it further and make sure they don't keep their shares in their personal name, but rather they keep their shares in their trust. That way, when you pass away, now that is is where legacy building or legacy creation comes in. When you pass away, there's nothing to transfer because your assets are structured in a way that your company owns your properties, your trust owns your shares to your company, and that is a structure that actually helps you save a lot of tax, especially estate duty, which is death tax. You obviously, when you pass away, your estate will pay that tax, and it can be 20% of 20 million is a lot of money. So that is where the due diligence comes in, and we show you all the options and what can go wrong when you don't plan properly, what can go wrong if you're buying in the wrong structure, and we help you with the process of setting up the correct structure for your investment.